Sorry, just waiting.
No problem. Mr. Vice President Solis, do you mind leading the pledge today?
No problem.
All right.
Is it still pinging?
Yeah.
Go back to it again and just click off on all those three things that are there on the same place I told you.
Okay, we're ready. Go ahead and begin.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
At this time, I'd like to call the special board meeting to order. Clerk of the board, please call the roll.
Arancibia?
Present.
Paul?
Present.
Segura?
Here.
Solis?
Present.
Tarantino?
Here.
Aguirre?
Here.
Adamos?
Here.
We will now hold a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance led by Vice President Arturo Solis.
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Per Government Code Section 54954.3, this is a point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on the item that has been described in the notice for the meeting before or during consideration of that item. Speakers shall refrain from using profanity and shall speak in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation.
Our first speaker is Alma Lowe.
Good afternoon. My name is Alma Lowe. I am the parent of two student athletes who attend the Sweetwater Union High School District. Today marks 350 days since my children have been able to attend school or play sports. Along with so many other students, their academic progress has suffered. Their mental health is deteriorating and their social interactions are almost at zero. Just last year, before the pandemic started, I attended a meeting to talk about the dangers of being on screen all day, the dangers of giving unlimited internet to our children, the lack of social interaction caused by being online in isolation. Yet 350 days later, here we are. No school, no sports, and 100% online. Our children are being subjected to the very dangers you yourself warned us about. I understand we're in a pandemic, and perhaps the district didn't know what to do at the beginning, but you have now had a year to prepare for various scenarios for returning to school and allowing sports to resume, yet no plan has been provided. I have attended board meetings, town halls, and have repeatedly heard we're following the science, reviewing the data. Sweetwater, are you still following the data? Because the CDC has stated teacher vaccines are not required to open up school. The science and data does not support any of these closures. In fact, the data is staggering against mental health, academic progression, suicide rates, physical abuse, and drug abuse. The data has proven school-age children are not high carriers of COVID-19, and the transmission is low. Yet this district still does not have a plan. Furthermore, just today, CIS just announced schools can resume practices as of today. Again, no parents. We're tired, quite frankly, of the excuses. What is your plan to open up our schools and resume sports? Not at 10%, but fully open for those students that want and need to return to campus. Sweetwater, what is your plan? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elizabeth McKay.
Good afternoon. I ask that the board revise the reopening metrics and consider following the same plan as the San Diego Unified School District. The case rates are continuing to decline. Teachers now have the option to get vaccinations if they so choose, and it is highly likely that student athletes over the age of 13 will be tested on a weekly basis. For many youth, online learning has had a very negative effect on their mental and physical well-being. Allow online learning to be an option for those that may not feel comfortable sending their children to in-person classes. If the vaccination rate continues to be successful and the case rates continue to decline, there is no reason all families should not have the option to return to in-person learning. Other states have successfully navigated this issue of getting kids back to school while keeping them safe. Our children should have the same opportunities that other states and other cities here in San Diego have afforded their children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ismina Castellon. Ms. Castellon, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm sorry. I had you still on mute.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. My name is Ismena Castellon. I don't have anything prepared, but I completely agree 100% with our first speaker. Pretty much echo everything that she said, and I'm just going to speak from the heart here. I've already emailed all of you, maybe 2, 3, 4 times at this point. I don't remember. I am just increasingly frustrated. I have a daughter, a freshman. She's a sports, she's an athlete, also a student. And like the first speaker said, and I can't remember her name now, you know, this is just beyond absurd what's happening, what this district is doing to our kids. We have had plenty of time to prepare for this. There is absolutely no reason anymore. The data backs it up that the schools are safe to be open. If there are teachers that are high risk, they can stay home and they can teach from their laptop. But it's enough what's happening, what's being done to our kids. It is truly an abomination. It's cruel, and it makes absolutely no sense. My daughter is also suffering from, you know, the isolation, not being able to play anything, not going to school. She's gone from being a straight A student to being a very mediocre student, and honestly, she's not learning anything. I sit there and listen to the instruction, and they're not assimilating and absorbing the information and learning. And it's really sad. And I would understand it if there was something that should be, it was like all across the country, but it's more than obvious now that this is more about the teachers' unions, their power, and I just wish somebody was advocating for our students. The unions advocate for their teachers. We need someone to advocate for our students. It is cruel, it is unjustified, and I pray that you guys please, somebody that has the power to do something, help us open the schools. Because unfortunately, not all of us can afford to pull them and put them in private schools. Otherwise, believe me, we would have all done it by now. Because this is just beyond, it makes no sense. The CDC says you can open the schools. There's low risk, there's low transmission. Everyone across the country is doing it. I have family in Texas, family in Florida. All my nephews, nieces are going to school since August, full time, not with all the crazy restrictions either, just normal, you know, common sense stuff. And everybody is, for the most part, fine. It's just enough. Please, whoever has the authority there and the power to do something, make them open our schools for our kids. And those that don't want to go to school, they can stay home. Why are we sacrificing the majority for the minority? It makes no sense. That's all I want to say. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thank you, Deanne. Thank you for the comments. Let me turn my camera on. Okay, with that, we'll just we have a presentation on Sweetwater's reopening and some athletic information as well. So I'll throw it to Dr. Aghetti, to whoever's going to lead that.
Thank you, President Segura, Board of Trustees, members of the public. This evening, we're here presenting information and bringing forth a recommendation regarding how we proceed in the process that are according to the plan that our board has previously approved. There is no on-off switch, unfortunately. However, we do have a plan in place that allows us to progressively, over time, in a manner that's safe, bring forth a gradual reopening of our campuses for the multitude of activities that occur. So with that, I don't know if you may notice, I'm actually at a different location today. I'm at Montgomery High School, and I just wanted to make note that we are doing everything possible to help facilitate and support our community as the vaccinations begin to roll out. So the reason we're here today at Montgomery High School is because there was a vaccination event that was a partnership, a true partnership with the City of San Diego, with the County of San Diego, with multiple agencies. And so the reason we're able to do this is because we're working together in collaboration to support bringing vaccines to an area of our community and our county that has the highest rates of COVID-19. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work that went into that, because this is how we will be able to gradually return to what we all desire, which is having students on campus, having our communities not have to deal with this. So I thought it was it was important to bear repeating that this is hugely important, and our district is a critical partner in the community to ensure that we're being part of the solution and we're doing what we can to address our students, our staff, and our larger community as well. So I thought it was worth a moment. I'll ask Dr. Alvarez if she can start bringing up the PowerPoint presentation for this evening. As we do that, I wanted to kind of remind us of why we're here. Our reopening plan is such that it calls for us to make an announcement on March 1st, that would be on Monday, around regarding our next steps. So we're bringing forward a set of recommendations regarding how we go to the next phase or the next stage of our reopening plan. And so with that in mind, I will ask the first piece is to have Mr. Tchaikovsky to go through the data and the metrics. I also wanted to emphasize and highlight the fact that prior to bringing this recommendation forward, as we had previously indicated, we did consult with our district physician, that would be Dr. Terrace out of UCSD. He's consulting with multiple districts as well as the county regarding kind of how we can proceed with a safe reopening plan for schools. And so again, just another point worth re-emphasizing that we continue to consult with multiple agencies, with multiple experts as we continue down this path that we are all seeking to go through, which is that gradual reopening process, again, in a manner that's safe, that follows the protocols that have been established, and that will allow us to have more students and staff gradually come on our campus in a manner that's safe. So with that, I will ask Mr. Tchaikovsky if he can begin the presentation. And Dr. Alvarez, were you able to bring that up on the screen?
Are you able to see it? I have it up on my screen. Is it not up?
It is not presenting on the screen.
Okay, let me try one more time. If I cannot get up on the screen, maybe Deanne can. Let me try one more time and we'll.
And there we go.
There we go.
Okay. So next slide. So here, Mr. Tchaikovsky.
Thanks, Dr. Aguirre. Good afternoon, board members. It feels funny to say good afternoon. Education colleagues and community members. I'll begin our presentation by reviewing the revised reopening plan metrics and milestones from our November 29th meeting. Just to reiterate, rather than staking out a specific reopening date sometime in the future, we decided to use both data and tier status of the County of San Diego, and then also data from our 10 main zip codes that comprise the district's attendance area. So in order to be able to consider moving to stage 2 of our reopening plan, several requirements must have been met. So first, the county as a whole must have been placed back into tier 2 or lower. So just to review that process, moving to tier 2 requires that three things mostly: that the adjusted 7-day case rate for the county has to be at 7.0 or lower. The testing positivity rate must be at 8% or lower, and the often less discussed health equity testing positivity percentage must be at 8% or lower. Furthermore, all of these metrics must be maintained for 2 consecutive weeks. And as of yesterday, Thursday the 25th, the adjusted rate had fallen to 15. So still above the threshold, but the other 2 metrics are now fortunately below the required thresholds. So again, there are many factors that could slow this progress with new strains, community behaviors, et cetera, but it looks like the county is on track if this progress continues for potentially a mid-March timeframe of moving to tier 2. Again, if the progress holds. So the next reopening requirements in the plan are internal to the district. The second requirement is that the 14-day case rate for the district's 10 zip codes must be under 200 for 2 consecutive weeks. In a moment, we'll take a closer look at that. The third requirement is that the testing positivity percentage for, again, the district's 10 zip codes must be below 8% for 2 consecutive weeks. And then, as Dr. Aguirre referred to in the opening remarks, we will consult again with a district physician consultant and then adding a pediatric epidemiologist prior to moving forward. Then once these indicators are met, then the district could open 2 weeks later to help provide all the necessary lead time for some final logistics. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a very simple graph I made just to show the trends and positivity rates. And it shows the trend of the county below with the orange line and the district above in the blue for testing positivity. So seeing testing positivity for the county below and then above in blue, the district. And you can see the little red dotted line shows the district's threshold of also the county's threshold, which are the same for moving into tier 2. The county is now below this, and they're grouped by week period of interest. If you go to the county HHSA page, it'll actually show it's below 5 today, but these are shown for continuity week by week with the number that's published at CDPH on 12 o'clock noon on Tuesdays. Due to the lag in where we get the data for the zip code breakout, I don't have the data for the last period of interest, but this is an estimate of 6.4 using basically the ratio from the previous period of interest. So at the very least, our district is either near or might be below this metric already, which is fantastic news. So things are moving in the right direction. And thank you. So this slide has a lot of information. Let me just to reiterate, the 14-day case rate is one of 3 major ways that case rates are expressed that you'll see in the news, etc. So this is one of the CDC metrics, not to be confused with the 7-day case rate formulae of the CDPH, and then where it expresses it per day, nor the CDC per week. So this is a 14-day figure. So if you can see, I apologize if it's too tiny to see, that the periods of interest are 2 weeks in length, and it shows them going back to from late December to the most current one that's available from the San Diego County Office of Ed webpage up to the 14th. This data, again, comes directly from that webpage that was built for this express purpose. So this graph shows a good deal of information in one place. It shows the data for 10 district zip codes expressed in the overlapping 14-day periods of interest from the virus peak at the end of December to its steady decline through mid-February. And there's 12 bars in each period of interest. The first 10 are our district zip codes of each of the 10. And then it's followed by the 11th bar. The second one from the right is the district average, that dark blue. And then the dark green is the county average. And I've arranged them so the final position is the order of the legend. So there's 3 really noteworthy trends shown here. Of course, the overall decrease in case rates is striking across the board. Every metric falls from a peak during the late December and or early January timeframe to recent lows that we have not seen since November. My colleagues at the county are overwhelmed this week with vaccination work, so they haven't updated the page yet today, which often happens on Friday. But when you look at the granular HHS data, it would indicate that this trend of an increase across the board continues to the most current data. The second trend I wanted to highlight for everybody is that the gap between the last 2 bars, the district in the dark blue, the second one from the right, and then the dark green, the county, that gap, that ratio continues to narrow. So it appears that the district's rate of decrease is going faster than the county, which is, again, fantastic news for us down here in South County. At the beginning, at its worst, it was 1.88 times the county, almost getting to double, where we were worried it was just becoming like uncoupled. Now it's only approximately 1.35 times the county's rate. So again, a really positive second trend here. And the final and maybe the most interesting trend I'd like to highlight is that when you examine the patterns within the specific zip codes, it becomes clear the areas that have experienced the highest degree of case rate community burden have recently experienced the most dramatic improvements. More specifically, moving from left to right, we see the greatest rate of decrease for San Ysidro in dark blue, South San Diego in orange, National City gray, South Chula Vista yellow, North Chula Vista, and so on. So essentially all the zip codes west of the 805, which have experienced very high rates, now seem to be recovering, interestingly, the most rapidly. It is important, as a final comment, to remember that case rate is only one element of expressing community burden per CDC, and it does not reflect other lingering impacts and trauma, but it is one of the key indicators for safe school reopening. So in summary, the county's not yet in tier 2. That could be by mid-March. The district's positivity looks like it's right at, or maybe even below our required indicator of 8%. And then the 14-day case rates are not at 200 yet, but if this progress, and that's a big if it continues, we too, by mid-March, could be seeing that go under 200. And that's it, Dr. Alvarez.
Sorry, we apologize for a little, is the slideshow back up?
No, it dropped from the screen, Dr. Alvarez.
Sorry, we're at the district office and they set the alarm off. So just one moment, we'll retry again. Apologize for that. Is it up now?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. So good evening. We wanted to just give once again an overarching view of everything that's been done in terms of instruction and auxiliary supports for students. As we began this school year in distance learning, we wanted to ensure that quality first instruction in distance learning was provided. And along with that, the systems of support for professional development for teachers and for our staff. As we mentioned in previous board reports, really the focus on standards aligned instruction and identifying essential standards in scope and sequence was a critical component, because we did not want students to feel overwhelmed by the amount of standards and the depth and breadth of the curriculum. We wanted to ensure that we had a manageable system for academic consistency across the district. We also looked at systems of support in terms of counseling, progress monitoring, and then what we have recently implemented in November, which was the small group cohorts. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Just as a reminder, as part of our opening plan, we did develop stages for transition to in-person instruction. We are currently and have been in stage 1 since the beginning of this school year. We did commence small group cohorts, which is part of that stage 1, as indicated in our reopening plan. Our current plan is potentially to move up to a 10% per day to instruction, in-person instruction, based on students with the greatest need. As the stages continue, Dr. Aguirre made reference to really a progressive and gradual reopening. It isn't like we can turn on and off a switch. There are many considerations, and districts are very complex. So we do have a plan to transition from a 10% in-person model to a 20% instructional model, up to a 15% or 50% on any given day, until we reach stage 5, where 100% of students would return to school every day. As mentioned before, we had continual supports for students in distance learning. This included the small group in-person cohorts that began in November. Each campus has at least 1 to up to 6 cohorts. On a weekly basis, we've had from 500 to over 1,000 students involved in cohorts. We know and understand that some families have been hesitant to have students on campus, and so we've also included small group virtual tutoring, in-person Saturday academies, and virtual Saturday academies, all types of virtual tutoring with teachers, and then our counseling supports, which have been included as virtual and small group in-person cohorts. We've also continued to support virtually our academic and athletic and enrichment courses through our before and after school programs. We brought to you in December a no credit pandemic and a revision of our grading approach for students. Today I'm bringing you the data for first semester and looking at the grade distribution for both our middle schools and high schools. Currently, this slide demonstrates the middle school grade distribution. We had about 39% of our students, or 39% of our grades in middle school were A's. A little bit under 19% were B's. A little over 14% were C's, and about 12% of the grades were D's. We did have 6.5% F's, and then 6% no credit pandemic. So if we look at the no credit pandemic and the F grades combined, it's about 12.5% of the grades distributed at middle school were in one of those 2 categories. For our high schools, we had 45% of our grades distributed were A's, close to 19% were B's, close to 14% were C's, D's were 8.5%, and F's 5.7. The NCP was used frequently at the high school at a 6.9. Once again, if we looked at the combined totals for the F's and the NCPs, it was 12, a little bit over 12.5%. And what's indicative of this is we're really looking at how we support students once this has happened. Let me give you some total numbers so that you see across the board distributions. So these are the numbers instead of the percentages. We do have some other grades that were given, and that was a combination of incomplete grades, no credit, and E grades. which were already functioning within our system. Most of those are for students who have been out ill, some of our students with disabilities, or students that came in late into the district. One of the critical factors before I go into this slide is that we did see 12% more failing grades in middle school in comparison to previous years, and about 6% more failing or no credit grades at the high school level in comparison. Dr. Winters had provided the board a board update on this, and part of the discussions that we've had with our high schools and middle schools is really what's happening at the professional learning community level, the supports that are being built in at schools for not only interventions, but also credit recovery. And as we mentioned before, we will have a robust summer bridge, summer program, and acceleration program. So as I mentioned, we are potentially moving into stage 2, and that's up to our 10% daily model. As Mr. Chakowski mentioned, we do have some metrics that have been established, not only local county metrics, but also our district metrics. And we are approaching those very quickly. Initially, the up to 10% model will focus on teacher volunteers. It will include small, stable groups, which is different from small cohorts. Students will be selected based on need, and we will have a schedule that will allow students to be on campus for 2 days each week. And that model looks like an A schedule where students would come on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays would be periods 1, 3, and 5. Tuesdays would be periods 2, 4, and 6. And then we do the same thing for a B schedule where students would come in Wednesdays and Thursdays for the same types of periods. As with all the on-campus events or interventions that we have provided, safety protocols would be implemented and followed. With that, I'm going to have Ms. Janaea Quirk talk about the health and safety implementations and considerations.
Good evening. The next 2 slides are visual reminders of the work that we've been putting in place around health and safety. First and foremost is the ionizers. To date, we have 8 campuses, which are 100% completed with installation, and we are on track to have all campuses complete by the end of June. Between now and then, every campus has been installed with ionizers in 20 classrooms, administration, counseling, nurse's office, school psychologists, and nutrition services on all campuses. In addition, there's an ongoing list of the PPE that we have available and to which has also been provided to our school sites. We have this available in our district warehouse for sites to continue to procure from us. And then the County Office of Education just throughout the county has continued to supplement PPE supplies, and we maintain that and distribute accordingly. Our objective is to maintain a 3-month supply as we forecast the need for elements of PPE to continue into the 21-22 school year. Right now, we are currently also having a discussion about the recommendation for double face coverings and are looking at us providing a secondary face covering to all students and staff while on site. Can we click to the next slide? Oh, there it is. It came late. That's the visual of the PPE available in the warehouse. Next slide. Thank you. This is just a reminder, as we've taken each school campus is equipped with multiple layers of visual communication, health screening signs, the health and screening just practices, hand washing signs for throughout the campus. Every campus has 2 to 4 drinking fountains that have been converted to hand washing stations and been provided at least 1 bottle filler in addition to any they already have on campus. Secondly, we have the foggers. The custodial teams are continuing to utilize those every day in all occupied spaces. And then lastly, we continue to push the availability and resources to administrators in what I'm now referring to as a toolkit, but it's virtual and they can access any of the signage, any of the training manuals, any of the information on the ionizers, et cetera, and we update that accordingly. Thank you.
Dr. Winters?
Good evening. This slide shows us the process and the overall summary of the data that we post on our Sweetwater website called a reopening dashboard. And it shows how we track COVID symptoms, exposure, and positive rates on our related to our campuses. And so on the left-hand side, you see that process chart whereby a potential, either someone with COVID symptoms or someone who's been exposed to COVID or is COVID positive notifies someone at our site. They then text a group of leaders and follow that up with an email to then receive a conversation with one of our staff members who determines whether or not that case fits to be reported in our reopening dashboard. So if it does fit, and indeed it is a COVID positive case of an individual who is on our campus, student or staff, then we add it to the dashboard. And if it doesn't fit that case, sometimes, for example, we have people exposed to or with symptoms that don't lead to a COVID positive rate, then we don't add them to the dashboard. And on the right-hand side, you can see since November, we've been tracking that data. And I'll take you through, if you don't mind looking at the November lines, I'll explain to you each one of those and what it represents. The first lighter blue tall line is the number of students who are coming to our schools in the academic cohorts. And that's the academic cohorts only and not the athletics. The second large or tall blue line is the number of staff members who are coming on campus on a weekly basis, and that's in November. Followed by the numbers you can barely see, a small number of district staff who have been reported based on the process I just described as COVID positive that are coming on campus. And that's not to say they were exposed on campus. In fact, we've seen no evidence of that, but they happen to be a part of those cohorts that were on campus. And then the smaller middle blue line there are the students who are part of those cohorts who were COVID positive during those months. And finally, we did report out the athletic cases of those who were reported COVID positive and part of our athletic cohorts. And so you can see that data shows that trend from November through February. And we do update this every 2 weeks.
And that moves us into athletics. Dr. Moore?
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez, and thank you, trustees and the public. We have had sports going on our campuses for a few months now. Prior to the official start of sports, most of our campuses had athletic cohorts beginning in October and November of 2020. Starting just a few weeks ago, once guidance came from the California Department of Public Health and CIF, sports that started just a few weeks ago include cross country, swim and dive, golf, tennis, and track and field. Those sports have begun practicing, and they have also had competitions on our campuses and at the local pools and golf courses. What will be starting next week, because the guidance from the California Department of Public Health has been issued, are the sports that you see listed in the middle of the slide, which include field hockey, co-ed football, co-ed roller hockey, softball, baseball, lacrosse, water polo, soccer, and competitive cheer. The asterisk next to football and water polo denotes that the guidelines have been issued from the California Department of Public Health, but there's also some other protocols that have to be followed in order for co-ed football and water polo to occur. They have been identified as close contact sports, and as such, there's some testing protocols and some more screening protocols that have to be put in place. But the intent, should this plan be approved by the board, would be to begin these sports per their start dates that are associated with CIF, and those dates range from the beginning of March into the middle of March for those sports listed. There are some sports that we are waiting for further guidance on, and those include basketball, volleyball, gymnastics, and wrestling. Those have been identified as indoor sports. And as we have learned in this pandemic, indoor sports and indoor settings can have a higher risk of transmission, particularly if other mitigating factors are not in place. So there is some more guidance before those sports are started, but those sports, pending the proper guidance, could be scheduled to begin again in March. The red bullet is really, and you'll see this again in the recommendations, just as Dr. Alvarez spoke at the beginning about some alterations to our grading policy that we made in relation to the pandemic. We are also going to ask the board to consider reviewing and providing a temporary amendment for board policy 6145 that covers extracurricular activities and grade point averages that are required to participate in those extracurricular activities. Very typically, it's a 2.0. That's stated in Metro Conference bylaws, that's stated in CIF bylaws as well. However, the board and the superintendent can implement a period of academic probation where students can be allowed to participate as they work towards improving their grades to make sure they're getting to that 2.0 grade point average mark. And so we'll be in the recommendation section asking the board to consider that and allowing for the superintendent to not just, very typically that's allowed for ninth graders because they're entering into the high school program, but we would, in this case, during the pandemic, would like the board to consider that for all students to be able to participate in athletics is in the next few weeks, having them be able to participate on an academic probationary status where if they're not quite at a 2.0, they have a chance to bring their grades up to continue to participate in sports, but they can start in sports.
Dr. Salkeld?
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez, and good evening, board trustees. The slide here we've shared at previous board presentations. It displays the financial information that we've received as a district to address learning loss mitigation and other items such as personal protective equipment and all the necessary supports as we navigate through the pandemic and those considerations. Two key things to note that have changed since our prior updates is related to the federal legislation at the end of December with the stimulus bill. As you can see under the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which is our resource 3220, that we were working with a deadline at the time under the legislation of December 30th, 2020. That has now changed to this end of this year, December 31st, 2021. And also most recently, as part of that legislation, we received an update from the California Department of Education just a few weeks ago on the allocation of additional funding sources. It's known as the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund Part 2. You'll hear us say ESSER Part 2. And so that allocation amount is a little over $34 million. We're still working through those details and how that'll be allocated. The funds itself, in terms of the dollars, the cash have not been received, but the allocation has been provided. One other item to note since our last board update is we did have a discussion at our last Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting on February 16th, where we also went a little bit more detail about different requirements and things that the district is doing regarding the CARES Act. As noted on this slide, we do have information that's posted periodically, particularly the quarterly reports that are required to be submitted to the California Department of Education, which is displayed on our district website, which is on this slide as well as a reference. I'd like to transition back to Dr. Alvarez. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Dr. Salkeld mentioned, the Corona Relief Fund, the GEAR funds, all the ESSER funds are really under the CARES Act guidance, along with the Learning Continuity Plan. And as we've mentioned, since the Learning Continuity Plan was heard by the board in early September, adopted on September 28th and then continued with several stages of review by the county and then brought back to the board. We continue to offer the small group supports. We hired temporary teachers at each school site to ensure that we had in-person instruction, in-person interventions. The virtual tutoring and after school and Saturday tutoring and Saturday academies were part of that plan. We also, as been mentioned, the supplies and materials for distance learning and in-person instruction have been critical elements in our plan. Personal protective equipment has been a component that we have had in place. Although small group instruction did not start until November, we have had staff, both certificated and classified staff on campuses the entire year, and so that's been a critical element for us. We did work for the first semester with having a portion of the counselors' salaries, in particular with their services that they were providing students during the pandemic, as well as some of the teachers on special assignment, our counselors on special assignment, our community resource facilitators. As Janaea mentioned previously, sanitization and other cleaning equipment were also purchased. We also had counseling small groups that began, and the mental health resources that were provided at school sites, along with professional development. And then, as we know, throughout all the board meetings, computers and access to connectivity or hotspots have certainly been relevant in our plan for both in-person instruction and distance learning, but in particular for distance learning. And so the CARES Act and all the subsequent funding have certainly provided those services or resources for us. Dr. Carbuccia?
Yes, thank you. One of the major components that we know when we talk about the Swiss cheese approach to protection on a campus, having multiple layers of protection, we know that the largest chunk of that cheese is vaccinations, and the single most protective thing that we can do to protect our communities is get vaccinated. And so we have spent, district leadership has spent the last number of weeks working very closely with the County of San Diego, with the City of San Diego, with the City of Imperial Beach, with the City of National City, and the City of Chula Vista on COVID-related either vaccine or personal protective equipment work. And so we wanted to kind of walk through that because that is a key point. It is absolutely known that it is safer for people if they are vaccinated, especially if we're bringing large groups of folks onto campus. And so one of the first things we did was we worked with the County of San Diego to enter into an agreement that would allow our school nurses to assist as vaccinators at county pods. And so we have nurses every day during the week working at the City of IB's facility, which happens to be on Mar Vista High School's campus, at the old Sears Center in Chula Vista, at the Southwestern College facility. So we have a number of our folks actively helping, even though it is not until tomorrow, Saturday, that educators are able to get vaccinated. They've been out there helping our communities and family. The second I mentioned was the Mar Vista site. The City of IB needed a site that was big enough, and we absolutely worked collaboratively with them and their team to ensure that the community could access Mar Vista's campus on a daily basis to get those vaccines, and we provided nurses to help. SUHI has been the home in working with the City of National City to a huge PPE site. We have a lot of space that we were able to assist the city with in storing personal protective equipment for the entire National City community, as well as Sweetwater schools in that PPE. And finally, as I mentioned, we've been working with the City of San Diego. It's not on the other side, but on this slide, we ran and hosted, as Dr. Aguirre mentioned earlier, a community vaccination site today at Montgomery High School that served over 300 of our staff and community that happen to have already qualified as 65 and older or caregivers, again, since educator vaccines tomorrow. And we've been working with VIBA to provide vaccines in a way that is convenient and timely for our communities. And so we are highly, highly and strongly encouraging our staffs to get out and get vaccinated so that we can return to some sense of normalcy. And we appreciate the work of our County Board of Supervisors and of all of our mayors and electeds in advocating to the governor to ensure that our schools, who have some of the highest percentages, are able to get vaccinated as soon as possible and get us back to a safe reopening. Dr. Alvarez and Dr. Aguirre have been speaking about.
Thank you. Dr. Aguirre?
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Another critical component, in addition to vaccines, is going to be COVID-19 testing. So as you can see, there's in essence two criteria. One is for teachers and staff, and one's for students. On the employee perspective, there's the ability to have mandatory COVID-19 testing. The current recommendation emanating from the state is every 2 months. It would allow us to maintain an ongoing monitoring of our positivity rates. In addition, one of the key aspects of our work is to work with San Diego State's Department of Public Health. They obtained a grant through the National Institutes of Health, and through that grant, they will be collaborating with us in order to be able to provide this testing initially at 3 of our sites, but as more of our students and staff come back, there is a possibility to scale that. But again, it's going to be building on that. Again, since it's provided through an NIH grant, once that contract comes forward for board approval, it would be at a no cost in a no cost environment. In terms of students, for students, we don't have the ability to mandate it. It's a voluntary COVID-19 testing. However, we do have the ability to strongly encourage, and it would be approximately every 2 weeks. It also allows us to monitor the ongoing positivity rate. Just a brief note, this testing that we're working with San Diego State would be an antigen testing, which is a rapid test. In essence, it would allow us to have results in 15 to 20 minutes. When there is a positive test result, it would be followed up with a second layer of a PCR, more in-depth COVID-19 test. And that has a little longer turnaround. But again, these are through that, both of these instances of testing are through that NIH grant. Next slide. So with that, we come to the recommendations. As you've seen, we provided data on the rate of spread. We provided data on teaching and learning and an update on how we're doing. We provided data around athletics and on our finances. And so we come to this recommendation after much deliberation, very careful thought, and with the intent of finding a balance in what is a very difficult environment. So these are our recommendations. We recommend to continue in distance learning through spring break, which is March 19th. We recommend that we add another checkpoint on March 18th. There are many moving parts to the COVID environment, and this would allow us to continue to monitor the ongoing trends when it comes to the transmission of COVID-19. It also would allow us to monitor and assess the rate of delivery of vaccinations. So that is a second recommendation. We recommend that we continue to safely reopen athletics based on recent developments, including guidance, updated guidance by the CDPH, and as well as impacts of recent legal cases. We recommend that we extend the athletic probationary period for all students through April 23rd, allowing students to meet the 2.0 grade point average requirement. This would be in order to allow students flexibility so that they are able to participate in athletic activity. We recommend that we establish a target to move to stage 2, which would be that 10% of Monday, April 12th, which again allows us to continue our ongoing monitoring. It would allow us to transition, which this transition would be voluntary for both teachers and students, as well as it allows vaccines to begin being delivered starting this Saturday, tomorrow. with likelihood of more educators returning to the work site per MOU. So those are our recommendations to the board. And this brings us to the conclusion of our staff presentation. And we are all as a team available for questions or comments of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gary and the team. I'll open it up to the board members, my colleagues, for any questions or comments on this. I would say that I truly appreciate all the work put into this. I like what I'm seeing. I like the directions that we are heading. I like the planning, the plan that we're staying with, and some of the added recommendations that you've included in this one. You know, the academic athletic probationary period, I think, was something I think is real good, and it's a good motivator for students. A lot of them there's so much happening that, you know, that it's difficult for them to keep the 2.0 or be at the 2.0 yet. So I think that's fair, and I'm glad that that's there. Let me see if I can see who has their hand up. Can you see who has their hand up?
I have Trustee Solis.
Yeah.
Has his hand up.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, President Segura. Thank you, staff, for this report, these recommendations. I know it's been tough and a lot of things change, and you guys have been able to adapt and give us the good information. I know we get compared a lot with San Diego Unified School District. Can we just give some similarities or differences between our plan and the plan that they just approved?
Yeah, so thank you, Trustee Solis. Well, one of the key points of demarcation is that we are not a unified district. We are a secondary district. And for example, we actually share our medical consultant, our medical advisors. Dr. Terrace supports us as well as them, as well as other districts. So one thing he did share is that at the secondary level, it is infinitely more complicated because of the movement between classes and coursework. There's athletics and VAPA and other activities that happen. So at a secondary level, it is more complicated. So sometimes I think that would be a point of difference. While they also have secondary, they also have elementary, which allows a little bit more flexibility in a method of returning. That's one example. We identified a similar return date, a target return date for that next level of coming back up to 10%. That's for us. They have a different meaning, but the date is similar. For us, the rationale for that is that it would allow a week between the time when spring break ends, in case we need to be monitoring case rate spread, in case if families were to travel or whatnot. It allows us 1 week. We are working towards having a contract for testing, which would allow us to have better visibility in terms of whether there has been additional case spread or not. One thing that we're also mindful of and trying to strike a balance in the conversation with Dr. Terrace, he indicated there is an ongoing awareness and monitoring of the UK variant. There may be other variants as well. So that's why a process that's phased in does make sense because it allows us to maintain some of the protocols recommended in terms of health and safety.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because so that's another thing I wanted to mention was with regards to I know our numbers are going down, but these variants are coming up, and it's just they're a little bit more aggressive, and they tend to not the vaccines don't tend to work as well. But I know they're still doing research on that, so I appreciate the gradual. And other question I had was regarding the ionizers and the MERV 13. I remember we had purchased many of those, or something had happened. And are we still going to do that, or was there a backlog, or the ionizers are going to be good enough for what we needed?
Thank you, Trustee Solis. Yeah, I'll ask Ms. Quirk to provide an answer in terms of what she found during that process of looking at the MERV 13 filters. Ms. Quirk?
Yeah, thank you. So at the time that we were making a decision about which path we were going to go down, MERV 13s were not available. And they were not going to be available until January, if not beyond. And so we started digging in and doing the research on other opportunities to improve the air quality in our classrooms and office spaces. And so that's how we arrived at the ionizers. And that is what we're continuing to do in terms of installation. An important thing about the MERV 13s is they actually would be an incredible stress on our mechanical systems and likely move us to end of life with them at a much faster rate due to the filtration on them and everything else. So the ionizers are working, we're testing them, we're continuing to see that it's improving and cleaning the air and showing us positive results with that. And with that messaging, we will always continue to state face coverings are our best layer of protection. And the more we're wearing our face coverings in the interiors, our personal aerosols are not becoming readily available for others. And so that's one of the things that we really want to continue to advocate and educate and talk about as we continue to move forward.
Wonderful, I appreciate that. And I too agree with President Sewura with regards to the sports. I think it's great, a great incentive for our kids that wouldn't have the ability to play because of their grades that come out and do some play some athletics. So appreciate that recommendation. Thank you for all the good work.
Thank you, Vice President Solis. Let's go to Student Representative Ramos.
Hello, thank you. I would like to kind of speak on behalf of some students and kind of speak to some parents that might be watching this board meeting. I do understand the frustration of learning online. It is obviously very difficult. I myself have struggled a little bit with my own grades having to learn online. However, even though students in sports, students in band and decathlon and all of these other activities don't have the same opportunity to go to these events or these competitions as they would have if we were in person, the decisions that are being made at these board meetings, from my own experience and from the experience of people that I've talked to, is to protect the safety of all of the students and the SUHSD community in general. Again, I do understand the frustration, and I myself wish that we can really go back in person. However, as stated before, it is not a black or white situation. Students cannot just choose to go back to school or to not go back to school. Some parents of these students don't have the choice to quarantine because they have to work every day, and all of these situations that students live in are very different. And sort of protecting that expectation that we have for our students to do well in school, but also honoring that they come from different experiences and not every student is provided with the same learning environment or household or anything like that through these guidelines is the best way to sort of move forward. So I think kind of approaching this feeling of frustration that we all collectively share is kind of just acknowledging that this is something that we are working towards together. It's not something where we have to butt heads or argue against one another for, because this is something that we're all feeling. It's something all of us never thought would happen a year from today. So I just wanted to say that for the students that are frustrated and for the parents that are frustrated too.
Thank you so much, Student Trustee Representative Ramos, for saying that. We'll go to Trustee Hall.
Thank you, President Segura. I just want to really recognize the hard work of our staff over the past year. I mean, not only does do educators really daily meet the needs of so many, right? The teachers, the students, the families. That's in a normal environment. In an environment like we've had this past year, I just want to say you all have done well beyond any expectations we could put on you. You've done stellar work. You've been leaders in this effort to keep our students in. As Sadamo said, I really appreciate what you said about getting perspective. Everybody feels this frustration of being shut down, locked down, having to distance learn. It's really tough. And I want to recognize the fact that we're all learning through this. We're all developing skills and abilities that we never thought we'd need to develop, but we're certainly, and part of that is grit. I mean, that word grit or perseverance. That's something my grandma used to always teach me was if at first you don't succeed, you try again, because that's what life is about. We have to keep going. We have to keep striving and encouraging each other. And I fully appreciate what staff has done here. I'm glad you answered the question about why the week after spring break. I think it's really clear. We saw spikes after Thanksgiving. We saw spikes after Memorial Day, after Christmas. So obviously when there's a vacation time and it's a traditional vacation, so many people want it that are really fatigued over having to be social distance, isolated, whatever, they take those opportunities to go out. And that's when we see some issues. So I'm glad you're really understanding that and planning for it, Dr. Aguirre. And I really appreciate having the extra staff hours that are dedicated to support the mental health of our students, to counsel them, to reach out to them, to try and find them when we haven't been able to reach those that are really critically missing from our classrooms. So I look forward to that, and it is good news that we are allowing athletics. Clearly that's been our intent and our desire all along. We thought it was going to start back last year at the end of the year in December, and that didn't work out because of the rates of COVID and positivity. And I just wanted to mention also that, it's my understanding that South Bay Union voted they're continuing with distance learning through the end of this year. So I don't know about the other feeder districts, what kind of decisions they've made, but that's a recognition of what's happening. I know Imperial Beach has had very significant high rates it was like 13% for a while. So it was way beyond what even the normal, low rate that's okay, you'll be in red tier, but safer. So there's still significant pockets of this happening, and I'm glad that we're not totally ignoring that. We're returning in a safe manner. And I want to thank you all for the advocacy with our elected officials, because clearly it has made a difference. And I think I want to recognize the work that they've done on our behalf as well. So maybe we could have a proclamation or something, whatever we can do to share their names in an official way and kind of give them that. I would really appreciate it. But I think you've done your work, and you've got all the evidence here to support the decision that we need to make tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. Dr. Arancibia.
Trustee Adamos, I just want to say, like, every single time that you were speaking right there, I was like nodding and giving you a thumbs up, because you were both empathetic and understanding of the situation, but also providing us the kind of a fresh reminder of the reality that we're living in. And you did it in a way that's so eloquent and a way that's most adults can't do. And I'm going to falter in my comparison to you. But I just want to say to you, thank you for saying what you said, because we all feel it. My daughters have had a rough week this week too with distance education, and it's hard, right? But what I do appreciate is that we're moving in a very deliberate path towards reopening. And we're looking at the facts, we're looking at the numbers, we're participating, getting all the information that we can possibly get to be able to open up in a methodical way. We're not making rash decisions. One of the things I don't want to do is open up and then close right back down because we haven't thought things through. And I really appreciate the leadership that the district has shown. Interim Superintendent Aguirre, I really, really appreciate that. I also want to give, an incredible amount of recognition to the staff that's made this happen for the last year, from everyone, from the food service workers that are feeding the community, to the instructors that have had to change modalities completely, to the top level administration that is literally sitting over and working tables over at Montgomery High today. I think that is, like Trustee Adamos, the best that we have here in our district, right? And I think that that's the way we move forward, right? We have to show that and continue giving that kindness and that compassion to each one of us, so then that we can continue moving forward towards opening up. And I just want to give you so much credit. Look at the partnerships we've developed with San Diego State and National Institutes of Health, with partnerships with different, elected leaders that can help us out in establishing a beachhead to fight, the infection rates and prevent the real issues facing our community. So I have nothing but kudos, and I'm really appreciative of the way that you're proceeding. And let's continue on. I think we're doing a really, really wonderful job. I thank you. I thank you, Trustee Adamos, as well.
Dr. Sebia, Trustee Tarantino.
Thank you, President Segura. I'd also like to echo my feeling that my colleagues have put forward. I think that the recommendations that are being put forward tonight are sound. I think that they reflect collective bargaining MOUs that we have put together with our labor partners, and I'd like to thank our labor partners for their cooperation in terms of coming together and working with us in terms of not only their safety, but also the safety of our students and those who work in our district. It was mentioned that a lot of our clerical support individuals have been working all year, our clerical support staff at schools, and then, like Dr. Adancibia mentioned, our food service workers have been out literally on the front lines, distributing hundreds of thousands of meals a day, and so all of that. And again, the groups that have worked, our staff, in putting these recommendations together. The presentation tonight was, I thought, excellent. It was comprehensive, and it was based on the best information that we have at this particular time. I think everybody has reiterated the fact that it's such a fluid situation, and things change sometimes by the hour. I think our path forward is sound. It's based on the information we have right now, and yet provides the flexibility to make changes as situations should change. So I just wanted, again, to reiterate what my colleagues said in terms of thanking everybody for all their cooperation in terms of putting this together. That's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to just state one more time, because it can't be said enough, in terms of the advocacy to get our educators vaccinated and our community as well. Like Trustee Hall mentioned, just outstanding work by Dr. Gary, General Counsel Carbuccia, and all working together with, and letting know our supervisor, Nora Vargas, and she listens, and she not only listens, she takes actions, as well as Chair Fletcher. So that's really paid off, and that's just super impressive what happened today. And I can just tell you, I heard a story from one of our elders that got vaccinated today, and she said she wouldn't have been able to get vaccinated if it wasn't in her community. She was over 70, maybe 75, I think she mentioned, but she said I can't go to San Diego. Just being in my neighborhood is huge. So that's really important, and it just really hits you right there in the heart. And I know we're going to continue to work to do that, and that's just tremendous kudos for that. And I look forward to, and I'm so glad that work. You mentioned that our consultation with our with our doctor, epidemiologist doctor, and look forward to our partnerships with San Diego State, continued partnerships with San Diego State, and the NIH grant that we will be voting on, I guess, in the future. So I just wanted to say that again. And with that, we need a motion to approve.
Yes, to approve C1 as stated on the agenda.
So moved.
Second, Solis.
Moved and second. Any more discussion? Okay, let's vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Arancibia,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Thank you, everybody. The special board meeting is now adjourned.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
all.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
you.